All right, let's get started. Oh, well, it's great to see you all. Very excited about tonight. This is our second event. Um, let's see, business. Usually, when you do these kinds of things, you have to do things like point out where the exits are and where the bathrooms are. But we don't have to do that. But I should let you know that we are recording. So if you, and the this session will get posted on our website once that's up and running. So if you don't want to uh, be shown, you can turn your video off. The other thing that a lot of groups are starting to do is to put out a statement in recognition of the indigenous people that have been on this land. And we want to do that too. I just want to understand it a little more. Um, this region that we live in, it has all these types of trees and maple trees and oak trees that belong here, and the rivers and the lakes and the specific wildlife that lives in this region. And the Massachusetts tribe lived in this region, from Salem down to Brockton and a little over to Central Mass. And they were an integral part of this ecosystem. Um, this is what we want to try to um, relearn. There are a lot of workshops and classes about gardening, growing tomatoes and pollinator asters and things like that. And we'd like to do that too, but we want to learn how to be more integral with our environment. Um, so um, we started a group to try to learn how to do that. It's organizing committee. And we sat around discussing things. We came to the table with a lot of different experiences that we brought to the table to figure this out. And in between meetings, we'd be going to workshops and seminars and learning new stuff and bringing that to the table. And I think when we are opening this up now to the public, we're just trying to build a bigger table. And so we're going to try to do this once a month. And Linda Forsythe, as one of the organizing crew, has very generously offered her yard as a demonstration garden to start from scratch almost, to use as a laboratory, to learn about concrete ways to do this. And we're going to continue throughout the growing season, and we'll come up on different issues, and we'll take side trips to explore those different issues like composting and watering issues and invasives and things like that. So we're going to start first with Prassede Calabi, who is very passionate and knowledgeable about ecosystems and wildlife and plants that part of the ecosystem, and Demetra Tseckares, who is a native landscape design and construction, a builder. She has her own company, and they are going to look at Linda's yard, evaluate it, have conversations about what she'd like, and see what fits in her yard, in her neighborhood. And they will walk you through that. And you can get ideas of what you can do in your yard. And then we're going to look a little at soil, which is so important. Carol Zoubek is a soil geek. And so each session, she's going to do a little deep dive into different parts of why soil is so important. And right after that, I'll go very briefly into soil tests. And then before we open things up for discussion, Mathilde is going to monitor the chat for questions and bring that up into discussion afterwards. But before that, Margo is going to update us. She's been madly trying to build a website for our community of gardeners to communicate with each other and to post resources and share resources and things like that. So why don't we get started? Prassede and Demetra and Linda, you're on.
All right, I'll start. I'm going to get share screen going, I hope. Is it sharing?
Yep.
Great. So you want to grow local. And the question is, what do you do now? We can all Google. We can Google lists like native plants and what's going to grow best in the sun and what's going to grow best in the shade. So you end up with lots of dots of information. And we thought that it would be maybe most useful if we tried to connect a bunch of dots for you and show you how to put together the things that you can look up. We also expect to post some lists to save you looking up some things on our website. I'm Prassede, and I'm going to start with this. I do habitat reconstruction or habitat restoration as well as gardening, and I'm going to try to give you the ecological picture. Ecology is really about the core things that all living creatures have to do, right? Which has to do, you have to get food and try to avoid becoming food. You have to get shelter, which means either protection in space or in time, and make babies. And you raise those babies who need food or need to not be eaten and who need protection or who migrate. So you end up with a circle. And it's one of the things that we are stressing a lot is the interactive quality of gardening, of soil regeneration, of healing the earth from all of the built environment traumas that we have created. And habitat is kind of a catch-all word for the food, the shelter, where the babies happen, where everything else happens. So what are some key principles that you need? Now, the audience we think is probably a mix of very experienced gardeners and people who might know one end of the shovel from another, but that's about it. So we're trying to pitch this kind of in the middle and give something for everybody. So what you need to start with is some soil. You want to find out about your soil. As Fred said, we have options for you how to test your soil, figure out what will grow and what won't grow. You want to plant native species as much as possible because they are co-evolved with the other creatures that live here. So that means they're going to be the best food plants and the shelter plants and so on. These species have come out together through evolutionary time. You need to know about your water, and you need to know how much sun you have and which way your garden faces. And as for where you can plant anywhere. If you do a window box, if you do a yard, if you a deck, the tree island, anything, it will help. We were going to talk to you about corridors for wildlife, and in particular corridors for pollinators and other insects. So I'm going to start you to inspire you, we hope, to start with a before picture. This is a real garden in Winchester. Is this full screen, or can you see the whole garden?
If you could put it in the slideshow.
Sorry, where am I putting it in slideshow?
The top.
Here, hang on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, because you're getting the small pictures on the side.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Slideshow. That slideshow.
You can also hit F5.
Command F5.
I think just F5,
F5.
you know, up at the top.
Yeah, hang on. F5. Nope, that's my. So let's see whether I can get rid of the center view. Custom. Nope, that's worse. Right now you see everything. Is that better or worse?
That's fine.
It's fine because then the pictures are on the side instead of overlapping.
Sorry about that. Okay, so here we are. This is a real garden, but I wanted it to be bigger. I don't know if you can see the detail. Slideshow.
There you go.
There we go.
You did it.
Okay, so this is a garden. Oh, and so now I went too far. This is the garden. You see there is, and there's an angle. The house is here actually on the right, and then there's 100-foot street front, and there's practically nothing growing there. It was a burnt out grass field, and with a little bit of time and a little bit of effort, it turned into this, which is actually quite a lot of habitat. There are conifers, there are deciduous. These are trees across the street, but they create a canopy because they're so close together. A lot of things can fly from one to the other or cross the street. There are many beds of flowering gardens. It's the time of year, you can't tell. There are butterfly bushes here. There are nut trees here. And there's a little bit of something for the people. You will discover that some people are more interested in feeding humans and some people are more interested in feeding other species. I'm definitely on the feeding other species end of the spectrum. So how do you know that what you're doing makes any difference? Well, we're in a very interesting place. We live here on the Atlantic Flyway, which means that migratory birds who either overwinter in the south or up in the very cold north fly basically right over our area. It's also true that we are on the monarch butterfly migration. So whatever you plant, any bit of planting, fruit, seed, something is going to affect multiple species at different seasons, which is very important to keep in mind because they need food and shelter at all seasons, right? And this is, we're scaling in. This is a GIS environment map, a habitat map. The dark gray shades are habitat fragments, meaning pieces of usable, well-planted area that are smaller than a certain amount, and the green are larger. This would be us, and this terrific program gives you connectivity maps showing you what is the least distance or the least costly distance for any animal to travel, avoiding roads and trying to take them along whatever plantings are there. Although you can't see them well on this map, I'm sorry, I will post a map that has very clear connectivity lines. You can find your house, you can see where you lie on a map so that you can get a very specific idea of how much you will be contributing to creating one of these wildlife corridors. There are people doing this all up and down the East Coast. There are people doing it from Maryland to Maine. And our ambitious plan is that we're going to connect all the way across this area. There's going to be enough habitat that we can get the pollinators and the butterflies back to the kind of health these species used to have. So this is the yard in Winchester that we're working on. This is Linda's yard. North is this way. These represent a bunch of arbor vitae, invasive, not invasive. They are non-native trees that have not much habitat value. This is a road with the driveway here. Demetra is going to walk us through a plan, a proposed plan for this place. I'll show you what it looks like in real life. This is the same point I was showing you coming up the driveway. The idea here is that you can put raised beds and vegetables on this. You walk into the yard. These are the conifers. These are the arbor vitae I was pointing out. They're perfectly nice trees. They make a good barrier there, privacy screening to the neighbors, but you can do a whole lot better in terms of the things you care about, in terms of food, in terms of fragrance for humans, in terms of flowers. There's a lot of bittersweet up in here. This is an invasive bittersweet, but it also gives some food. The idea here, because Linda has been generous and wants to do this right, you can see a little bit of the red, see up in here, that's all bittersweet, is to take that out and replace it with a native bittersweet, which gives much better food value so that you can give more calories and have better digestibility. They have more sugar and less wax. This is facing east. This is a huge mass of brambles here. I think there might be raspberries there, is that right?
Not at this point.
Not at this point. So this is old school planting and replacing all of that with stuff that's yummy, and putting, in particular, one of my things I like to do is to put a lot of growing fragrant vines on the fences, so that again, you get a lot of habitat in the smallest possible space, or the most possible habitat in a given space. This is facing south. There's another street here. You can see this has a pretty good southern exposure, which means that she has a lot of options for what can be planted, and including vegetables, because they're going to need a lot of sun. So that was very quick. Thinking about your yard, start small. Who do you want to help? What do you want to help? What do you want to do first? And like I said, whether you plant a window box or the tree island or whatever, I'm going to ask you now to take a piece of paper and write down 3 things that you think you want to have happen, or 3 inspirations that you have. Who you want to help, what do you want to do? We'll come to them, we'll talk about them after we go through Demetra's plans for Linda's yard. Write down those things, we'll come back to them. So what I'm going to say to you, because I'm a habitat person, is plant native species for native animals. They're going to give you food, leaves, nectar, pollen, flowers, seeds, fruits, leaf litter, all of those things. Also indirectly food, because you support the animals that are eaten by other animals, going to give you shelter, leaf litter. Don't forget tall trees, and don't forget water. Whatever you need for your plants, you're also going to need for your animals. So that's a lightning round through an ecological thought about gardens and habitat. And now handing it over to Demetra, who's going to show you plans for Linda's yard.
So, hi, everybody. Before I share the screen, mostly I want to talk about design, because that's the next thing. Like, we're trying to, you know, honor the earth and be more integral and all of that. And it's almost counterintuitive that strong design helps, but strong design does help, because it gives you a chance to, over time, layer in all of the plants you want to achieve this dream that you want for your garden, whether it's small or large or somewhere in between. So I'm going to share my screen now. And I hand design, I just draw. So this screen, oh, and I'll go into, let's see if my magic F5 button doesn't work. Well, I can't figure out slideshow either. So if this is acceptable, I'm going to keep on going. Okay. So this is a hand-drawn 2-scale design of what we call the back 60, because it's 60, roughly 60 by 60. And it includes this stretch along the driveway that Prassede showed you in that very first picture. When Linda and I met, and when Linda and Prassede met, and when we've talked over Zoom and et cetera, and through email, the thing that Linda really wants to achieve, well, one of many things, is a garden that can feed her and her friends and her, you know, acquaintances, neighbors, people in her life, and a garden that creates a sense of space for her that is whimsical and beautiful, has a sense of privacy. And it's a garden that is attracting birds year round, giving actively, mindfully being part of that corridor for habitat. For songbirds in particular really need our help, as do all of our pollinators. You guys probably all know this. So I looked at this design to try to achieve those things. She also works with some people who like to move through space. And she said that in sort of that figure 8, that symbol of infinity, is something that is important. So I working toward get all of that into this part of her property. So the first thing that needs to be done really in anyone's yard is you got to get rid of the bad guys. She's got the bittersweet, there's burning bush, there's that wild rose. If you don't get rid of it, you're always going to be fighting it. And fighting something like that can be really distressing. So that's number one. And then that line of arbor vitae that you might remember were sort of huge and looming, they need to be pruned and cared for. And that requires a certified arborist, someone who really knows what they're doing. And we forget that trees in all of their big, tall mightiness are plants that need to be managed as well in a suburban, urban environment. So that's on her to-do list. And then what I did with the design, and this is preliminary, so it starts the feedback loop, and this is what you could do in your own garden, is I layered in perimeter gardens that go all the way around. There's an existing fence all the way around. And I added plants. I removed a bunch of invasive stuff on this side. I removed there's invasive on the front. And then mostly it's about, in my brain, I'm thinking, ooh, we're going to cut these nice deep beds. We're going to amend the soil with compost, et cetera. And we're going to plant it fully with native plants, some not native because we can't resist certain things. And with the idea of getting songbirds, pollinators, and personal joy, okay? Then on the inside, Linda really wants to have people in her garden working at a big table, sitting for dinner at a big table. So I'm envisioning a sort of free-form stone patio with maybe a seat wall that holds it. There's a slight rise in elevation right here. So what we can do is use that seat wall, and we might turn it. We have to kind of go and look at the lay of the land to hold the soil. And then this can become, as Linda said, the arugula hill, which can just be where you can grow. There's no rule that says you can't grow food in and amongst your perennials and in your pollinator garden and in your shrub bed, et cetera. So this could become a pollinator garden with arugula, with lettuces, with fennel, with dill, whatever. We can figure that out. I punctuate with trees because privacy, sense of space, and I'm mindful that this area needs the most sun, this whole place. There's an island bed that I'm imagining so that this becomes a movement through and around. It can be a small infinity. It can be a larger one. It can work, I hope. Then if we exit this garden and we come down, this is all asphalt. And in this area, there can be a nice fat compost situation. I happen to like the kinds that are contained. They're like big drums side by side. You can actually make really good compost in 2 weeks if you spin it, if you're on that. Moving down, I'm envisioning raised beds, which one just running the length, in section, running the length 8 inches tall, right along this line, filled with pollinator flowers. That can be annuals, it can be perennials, but just some, it can be a meadow mix, just some joyful, really pretty thing that says to the bees, come here, come here. And then I think we're good with 4 beds. I measured it again the other day and this looks right. So these, I'm thinking in my brain, would be 4 feet deep, because you got to be able to reach 8 feet long, and then waist height, because we're not getting any younger. And that allows more flexibility in terms of what you want to grow. The bed closest to the street would be a foot lower, because it's kind of visually nice. And that can be a place also if you want more pollinators or for lettuces and that kind of thing. So I do have some images. This, which you can also, hopefully you've been looking at, this is that arborvitae line. This is the line across the front street. Right around here, we're thinking patio. And this area on this side of the fence is where the raised garden would be. Pick their own salad and sit down for dinner and enjoy a beautiful night in her backyard can happen with this design. Just some visuals, ideas of crashed rock. This all comes from talking to Linda. So this is just idea. It doesn't feel like a place where a very perfectly rectangular cut bluestone, patio would be, even though I love that too. Maybe a seat wall stacked, maybe thinner field stone, maybe rounder, but that's the kind of idea, that it would be a curve, not a straight wall. And then this is just imagining these beds. And because they sit on asphalt, Fred brought up an interesting point, like, what do you do with the water? It's going to run off, go down the storm drain. So there are ways to create sort of a berm using either just a fold of asphalt that can be removed, or gravel or wood. We can figure something out. But we didn't want to remove the asphalt because doing that is costly. It's disgusting. And because then it's just thrown away. And it limits in the future, if the asphalt should be asphalt again, the beds can be moved and you still have your asphalt. So I think I'm going to stop because I do have plant images, but I'm happy to share them later if people have questions. But mostly I want to really stress that in this design, there is, I didn't do the math. I'm going to guess it's about 80% natives. It might be higher. That's the target number to achieve a habitat that is really welcoming all those native birds and bugs that you want in your yard. We're going to get squirrels, we're going to get rabbits, we're going to get those creatures. We don't want to attract rabbits, but we'll get them. But it's the songbirds and the bugs, the good bugs, that we need to help. Okay? Am I good? Okay. So I'm going to get out of here. Okay, I'm conscious of time.
Okay, actually, you're doing great. We're right on time.
Yay.
Yeah. We are going to move along. So you'll have a chance to ask Demetra and Prassede questions later.
And to tell us their 3 main goals, anybody who wants to share their 3 main goals, or put them in the chat and I'll start looking at them.
Great. So next is soil. Soil is the most critical part, we think, in restoring the ecosystem. And there are 3 parts to the soil. There's the biology, there's the chemistry, and then there is a third part that isn't talked about as much, is there's the energy component, things like photosynthesis and the electromagnetic energy of the earth, and a lot of more subtle things like that. But we're going to get into mostly the biology, which Carol is going to get into right now.
Yes, just 1 second here. So the topic is rhizosphere. And basically, I'm on, one second. Sorry about that. Okay, let me move these. It's basically the region of soil in the vicinity of plant roots where chemistry and microbiology is influenced by their growth, respiration, nutrient exchange. And the key thing is all the many benefits as is outlined below. It helps with stress response. I mean, basically it's an extremely healthy system that could handle a lot that comes at it, versus stepping back now to give you a, for instance, on the left here is degraded land. And the key, as this mentions, is the most meaningful indicator for the health of the land and long-term wealth of a nation is whether soil is being formed or lost. So if you're using the right principles, you will actually be able to grow back and restore the soils. And John D. Liu is one of the key stars of the Kiss the Ground movie. Okay, one sec. Oh, each one is so different. Why would it not be going down now? Sorry about that. View. I'm gonna have to do it this way. And how you could look at it from the local standpoint is what you can do for a vacant lot versus creating an awesome city garden. And the key thing you can see here is if you don't have your land covered, then you'll have the carbon and the water. A fair amount of times people don't pay attention to the fact that you're also losing water, and that's also not a good thing in regards to the environment. And I just recently found out that this decade, the UN decided is a decade of ecosystem restoration. It's just amazing how, like, over the last 3 or 4 months, it's so taken off to the point where I'm a bit overwhelmed because Gabe Brown actually spoke today at the Senate for the Agriculture Committee. So I was involved with that all afternoon discussing, and it was amazing. And a key thing in regards to plants, you all are familiar with perennial and annual. Here's an extreme example as to why it's so important. The root structure is extremely important. So when you have perennials that stay through year to year, the roots go down further and just really help build a healthy soil. There are some reasons for having annuals because then they die and they can help go back into the soil, but really the percentage of perennials is extremely important. And here's another diagram in regards to why it's so important. You still have carbon going up when you have it covered, but the key thing is you bring the cycle back. The carbon is being brought back down and the water is being retained. And these are the 4 main reasons for the healthy soils: water storage and filtration. It doesn't run off. Carbon capture and storage. There's a huge movement towards carbon farming and carbon credits, and huge appreciation for the biodiversity and the function and the productive capacity. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but we all know how important compost is. And key reasons is it adds what's called humus depends on who you talk to, which keeps the soil particles stuck together, which is so important. And now I'm going to dive right smack back into the rhizosphere. A lot of people call it, that are soil geeks like me, call it the big exchange. So you have the photosynthesis that creates an incredible liquid sugar that goes through and feeds all the microbes. The rhizosphere is the plant's gut. It contains a huge numbers of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, viruses. They're all good. You know, there's some good viruses out there and there's good bacteria. And it's a wonderful sharing society. And you've probably all heard of mycorrhizal fungi. It's an extremely important, and it really won't exist unless you have extremely healthy soils, or the length of them and how active they are. And there's been proof that the plants that are, the photosynthesis is much faster, and it also is much more robust. And another way to look at ants have a social network just like we do, and they communicate with each other, and they literally help communicate and warn other plants as far as any type of danger to them, so they can build more resilience and resistance. This is getting to be, I'm overwhelmed with the number of conferences and webinars that I'm going to. This is from a group in Rutgers. They have a huge team of graduate students, and the professor is basically saying just over the last 2 to 5 years, they've been deep diving into it, and they really didn't fully realize what's going on down there. In case you're wondering, why haven't I really heard of it? And I have 3 minutes left. Okay. Back to the core principle. So regenerative agriculture. Now, for a while, they just had the 5 on the side, but then they realized you really need to make sure you understand your own operation. Like the first presentation was real specific towards that location, and minimize soil disturbance. Organic farmers, unfortunately, were tilling too much, and they were destroying the extremely important network. And when you don't do that, you actually yield a lot more, like I was just describing. And here is another beautiful diagram of what is going on here. And another way, they call it the plant's guts. It contains, huge, again, the bacteria, fungi. And again, here's a mycorrhizal fungi that is just extremely important for all. And here's good old photosynthesis. And General Mills is really diving into it and is taking incredible amounts of data, and is really helping. But it's just, I'm just so heartwarming to see that such a large company, they're converting 1 million acres over to it. And they're, I put Bernie Sanders here because he's my recent hero, because Vilsack, who was just the agriculture guy, unfortunately is a little bit too much into big ag, and Bernie Sanders did a really good job saying no and giving all the reasons for it. I mean, there's definitely still hope because there's such a huge movement, but we were also watching that. Carbon-rich soil, you'll hear like I said, the carbon trading and what have you, and you'll hear liquid carbon. In order for it to flow, there has to be this partnership. And again, when you'll see these aggregates, it's just very powerful. So if you see healthy soil on the left, if you see the dust, you need to have more amendments. And this ties into, I showed this before, a key thing is we inadvertently blow the microbial bridge in conventional farming with high rates of synthetic fertilizers, or even with fungicides or other biocides. It's just like the probiotics that we add to our guts. 26 seconds. This is really evolving, as far as this is on the left-hand side is even green. Unfortunately, Bill Gates is going back to the green industrial revolution. It's not. It's still just using old simplistic methods instead of holistic abundance mindset. Oh, it was telling me to. So final thing is rather harness the regenerative power of healthy natural ecosystems versus soil, which is so exhausted that we have to add a lot of what they think is called nutrients. So you can keep having it artificially looking like this, but you have to have this awful stuff happening. So that's it.
Thanks, Carol.
There we go.
So I'm going to do soil tests now. So most soil soil tests are for chemistry. There are a couple of companies out there that do soil tests for biology to find out what kind of bacteria and microbes you have in your soil, but mostly it's for chemistry. And if you're looking at the health of your soil, your first consideration is the biology, because that is the system that brings in the nourishment to the plants from the soil. So whatever nourishment there is, the biology, if it's healthy, it will bring it to the plants. But if you start growing food, if you really want healthy foods, and I think later on in our series, Linda is going to get into the health aspect of gardening, food as medicine. If you're interested in looking at it that way, you really want to look at the mineral and the chemistry composition in your soil. If you have, so this is a company, Logan Labs out in Ohio. They do a very thorough breakdown, not just the main chemicals, phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium, but they really get into the trace elements. And it's those trace elements that really help the different parts of the plant grow. It's just like all the different vitamins and minerals that we humans need for our development. And so I guess the first number that most people know about is the pH. And it's the balance between alkaline and acidic soils. And if it's out of whack one way or the other, it's going to affect the types of nutrients that the soil can or cannot take in from the ground. The nutrients might be in the ground, but if the plant can't use them, it's pretty useless. So the soil test will, right here, will show you what the pH level. Oh, okay. So I did soil tests in two parts of my yard. One, I have two large raised beds, about 275 square feet. And the rest of the yard, I want to plant perennial gardens and grow fruit trees and raspberries and things like that, and herbs. And so so there's two very different things I'm doing with the yard. So and it's two different types of soil. Before I knew about the importance of soil, I brought in several yards of composted manure and used that for my raised gardens. And it turns out that there's too much organic matter. That's the line here below the pH. You can see that number for the garden with the composted manure, and that number is a lot smaller for the rest of the yard. And so even though it's really great composted manure, it just presented a whole other problem for me. And the other number, large picture number, is this total exchange capacity. And again, the difference between my garden and the rest of the yard. Total exchange capacity is the ability of the soil to hold the nutrients. And you can see here that the rest of the yard has very low total exchange capacity. I am going to switch to UMass. I sent in the results of my lab work to UMass, and they evaluated my numbers and told me what's going on in my yard. And this total, go back to the total exchange capacity. This is the desired value. The garden was okay, but the rest of the yard was really low. So that meant that whatever nutrients I have in the yard, it just wasn't enough for the fruit trees or anything else that I wanted to grow there. So which they recommended all sorts of amendments to add to it. And because it's so low, it would be something that I would have to add to throughout the season and over the years. Now, Demetra's including raised beds for Linda's design. And I'm finding out very recently that the soil in the raised beds need to be tested frequently because the total exchange capacity is very low in those beds because there is a tendency with heavy rains, the nutrients get washed out of the out of those raised beds. And so you have to make sure what to add each year. Okay, so this is a very general rundown on soil tests. And if you want to ask questions, we could figure things out later in the discussion. So the next part of the evening, before we get to the discussion part, is Margo is trying to build a website for everybody. And our first meeting, we got a lot of feedback that people want a place where they can talk with each other and share ideas and ask questions. So Margo is just getting the website together, and she's going to talk to you about it.
Hi, everyone. Those are wonderful presentations. So for Grow Local for the Planet, will be a website for everyone to find resources, to find what our mission statement, to share ideas. And I'll go over each maybe page just for everyone to get a general idea. So the homepage, you can sign up right there. It'll take you to the forum page is what you're signing up for. We try to point out, this can change, point out some major features about the website in our organization, our community. So that's the homepage. And then we go to, it's hard when so our about page, are we on the about page? No, I think I do share.
Yes, we are.
Yes,
We
you
are?
are.
Okay. I can't seem to see it. Let me see.
Beautiful.
Oh, here we go. Okay. Yeah, so this is our mission statement that was written by Fred. And this is just a graphic, but maybe on this page, we might feature any kind of projects that the group wants to talk about and feature it there. Okay, the next one would be learning. Okay, I gotta close my thing. This would be a place where people can write articles, some of our experts or gardeners who have a certain interest. It could be a gallery space of pictures, places where we put our videos. That's probably where, I don't know if Linda will have a special page or she could be in here. And there'll be categories like healthy food or native plants and things like that. So you'll be able to find them easily if you want to look up a particular subject. Okay, let me see. We also have resources. So this is where I found that from the meetings that a lot of people had external links that they thought were very interesting, which you can share in the forum, but it's nice to have it in a set place. So maybe these are more established, these are links that people really like. And so soil, you would have something like this, try to note if something's a video or not. This is a image, so I can't click on it. But this gives you an example. It's just text, but it takes you to where you want to go. Next is a calendar. Fred was saying this is more centered around our community. So if we have, let's say we're doing something in Linda's yard, then if we're filming it, you can come and watch behind the scene. If someone is doing something and like to do a tour of their garden, they can do that once it's safe. And things like that. Okay, so last. Okay, so we have a sign up. No, this is the forum. Okay, the forum page is sort of like this. So this is more of coming to the forum, and then you would click on that grow local for the planet. And there you would have different subject matters, composting, soil, native plants, native trees, things like that. And you can, log in right here on the right-hand side. See if I did put it in order. Did I show the right one? I'm not sure. And then the sign-up page is more of that's maybe coming from the home page or some other page where you're thinking about, a person might be thinking about signing up, and then this is more information of why they should sign up. I think. So this is, I'm getting very close to finishing. And probably what's going to happen is anything that was talked about today, any presentation will be put up here. I probably will be having members test the site, help me test it and make sure everything's working. Make sure we don't have any little buggy boos in there. So what do people think?
It's gorgeous.
Yay, okay. And Mathilde has been helping me gather everyone else with your links and resources. And she's been helping to write some of the text and copy. And she's planning on writing an article that will be part of the Learn blog. And everyone is welcome to be a author. And if you say that this is what you want, then I will give you set up an author's privilege. I don't know. So you'll be able to just log in and upload your articles. Okay, sound good?
Yeah, I also want to say I'm learning this whole field, and I thought if I could write an article, it gives me an opportunity to learn and do something fun. So if you're shy, then it's still an opportunity to learn. So don't hesitate.
Fred, you can't hear you, Fred.
Fred, you're muted.
Sorry. So along that theme, learning about ecosystems is new for a lot of us, and putting on this presentation is also new for a lot of us. So this is definitely a growing experience for the organizing committee, but it's like, I feel like we're part of a growing movement of people all across the country and the world that feel like this is an important thing to be doing. And we're all learning about it at about the same time. And and part of that is we're going to move into the discussion part, is learning from each other. So Mathilde, what's
Yeah.
going on in the chat?
So in the chat, there were a few questions. So the first one is one I asked, so I'll just go as we went. So I asked a question about invasive plant, what it means versus native and non-native. And I guess along with this is what or where is a good resource to find native plants or native trees around here?
I can I can stab at that if you want me to.
Mhm.
So there's feedback and I don't know why. If you don't know about Garden in the Woods, which is out in Framingham, It's an extraordinary resource, and they have plants at their shop, and you can order and pick up, so it's safe. They get a lot of their plants from the Sami farm, which is further out west. It's like, I don't know, 2 hours from here. And they grow all natives. You can get plugs, you can get all sorts of things. So that's one place, and you can order them at Garden at the Woods and pick them up there. There are more and more natives right at Mahoney's, right in town. More natives at McCue's, which is right up the street in Woburn.
Okay.
And then there are a lot of online places. Also, there's an organization called grownative.org, and they have a plant sale every year, and it's all native. So that's a wonderful organization to join and to shop at. That's what I know. I'm sure others know more.
So to follow up on the Grow Native plant sale. Last year, they installed a minimum order. It's like almost a couple of $100. So maybe if people are interested, we can combine on an order so we can meet that threshold. And that would be something that can happen through the website.
And I have something to offer in that vein too. There has been, as there was last summer, quite a demand for gardening. COVID has brought out the gardener in many people because they can't do whatever they would normally do. And so it's been quite beneficial to the planet in some ways. I have a pound and some of pollinator plants seeds from a reliable of good seed company, and I'm happy to sell that out to people. It's not expensive, it's just that they were running out, literally. I bought this several weeks ago, so I'm happy to share that with anyone here. If you want to put into the chat, I can send you more information. I'll put out some information and you can decide whether you want it. So we've already met the threshold, meaning I've already bought it, and I don't really need 1.5 pounds of pollinator seed, but I would love to share it with people who are interested in having some. So I'm happy to make that available to people. Just let me know.
All right. So I guess I'll go to the next question. In the chat, someone asked during Carol's talk, keeps the soil covered with mulch, ? So do you need to use mulch to cover the soil, or is there anything else you can use?
It's actually net better to use diversified plants. Kind of like what I have behind me, but not exactly.
Yeah.
Basically anything that has a root system. Mulch could be part of it, but it's really key to have the plants in between.
Demetra?
Not sure I understand. Could you explain that some more, please?
So what Carol is describing, there's a way to think about plants that mulch is a useful tool to keep moisture in and weeds down, and it can be a neat and tidying thing. But mulch can also be a really destructive force in a garden because it's made of dyed, crappy, brand new wood that sucks all the food that the plants need. If it gets mixed into the soil, it takes the food from the plants, so it's bad. And furthermore, if you do use a good mulch, and there are good mulches out there, you can then start to think about your garden, understanding that plants like to be in community. So just like we do, and we don't like this isolation thing very much, plants are not designed to be all alone surrounded by mulch. You would never see that out in the world unless something wrong has happened. So what Carol is saying is communities of plants, there are low ones, medium, taller, really tall. That's how a garden is really at its healthiest. It's an aesthetic thing. But there are good mulches too if you don't want to grow such a thick landscape, even though that's really beautiful.
Yeah, and even
And
though,
the thing that Carol showed was that it's really important to have the root activity in the soil, to have the continuous process with the bacteria and the fungi. And that photosynthesis soil plant process brings the sugars into the soil, and it helps the soil hold the moisture. That moisture is with the canopy of the plants, protecting against the heat of the sun. So it sort of goes against traditional agricultural practices where you let the field lie fallow. This regenerative practice is the best way to do it is you have continuous plants growing on the ground.
especially with concern on climate change, they literally is the photosynthesis. It provides liquid carbon that with healthy soils goes down and stays there. It reduces our panic basically with the, yeah.
So Carol, even on a small level in a home garden, if I have a perimeter garden that's trees, but I put mulch underneath, I'm missing out on an opportunity where I could be having a living mulch, which is a ground cover or, you know, a variety of perennials, and they're doing what you just said, right?
Exactly. And actually the key thing, because it's the old pendulum. It's like people are saying, oh, don't, you know, leave all your leaves the way they are. Yes, leave them on your yard, but do it carefully, because you don't want to have this huge matting of the leaves, which isn't letting the sun in. But if you actually, there's composting mowers that will chop it up to very small, so that it'll help feed the soil. And then, yeah, that's a key part. And also you should spread it, because like a property I'm helping with, there's a couple of trees where right there is a gazillion, and then we chop it up and we spread it around. We share it. Like that's what the concept of regenerative is. Share and you'll be benefited.
Yeah, mulch, I could talk about mulch for 4 hours, so I won't, but I will say one thing, which is people who have bought into the idea of hiring an army to come with really loud blowers and remove every leaf from their property. That's unfortunate. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I found a battery operated leaf vacuum and chopper, but I'll just do that in the areas where there's too much, or like in the parking lot before anybody drives over it, because be careful, don't pick up leaves that have too much car stuff all over it.
But I have to agree with Demetra. There's a real drawback to disturbing and particularly chopping your leaf litter. There are a lot of butterflies and salamanders and frogs and things that live in the litter. And the sort of what I dismissively call the golf course approach to landscaping is very unfriendly to all species living in an area. And even here in Winchester, we have salamanders in our leaf litter. And never mind the noise, right? But let's just focus on the habitat consequences to other species. I think that gentle raking is the best, the most, the worst that you should do. And if you even just pile it on your flower beds to get them through the winter, you are going to be ahead in terms of creating habitat. You know, butterflies, I have to say this, we are so callow about these things, partly through sheer ignorance. Some of these little damselfly, dragonfly things, the really transparent wings, the very pale turquoisey ones, those things take 3 years to get to that stage. And do you know how fast people just crunch it like it's that's 3 years in the growing. I mean, it's just, I have to use the word sinful. It is so wasteful. It is so disturbing. And it's true for so many insects. And we get rid of stuff and go through and trash on a time scale that just doesn't bear any biological resemblance to the lifespan of these creatures. And to me, that's a terrible thing. I have gotten, when I'm really underslept and hypersensitive, when someone has a leaf blower going, I feel like there's a murder going on in my neighborhood because of all of the lives that are being destroyed. And you can say, oh, they're only insects and so on. I need to point out, to remind you if you know, and point out if you don't, 76% reduction in insects in the last 20 years, 76%. I don't even put screens up in my house anymore. And I live in Winchester, right close to most of you. And I don't really have any problems with the bugs, certainly not in the second floor. And the first floor, maybe sometimes, because there are so few of them.
Exactly.
So I feel really strongly about that.
Yeah, exactly. I feel extremely strongly about that too. I'm glad you brought that up because I basically only vacuumed up about 20%. And I mean, there's a gazillion other things involved, but yeah, that's definitely one of the top 10 things to consider. But like I said, I only vacuumed up 20%. And the key part were the stuff that someone else was going to be bagging up and taking away. So I knew someone was going to want to do that. So those are the ones I rescued to use on the lawn.
I have noticed the last few years is no mosquitoes, no no-see-ums, it's like, where did they go?
Yeah.
Which means, and this has the animals feeding the animals that feed the animals, that means that bats and all the birds who eat insects have nothing to eat. And I mean, nothing to eat. So it has consequences up the whole food chain, dire consequences up the whole food chain. And that's has to be stopped before it's too late.
For the first time this year, I had bluebirds at my bird feeder. Has anyone else seen that this year? A lot of people have, and this is bizarre behavior. It's because they're so hungry. Because bluebirds are those, it's just bizarre.
Well, there were a couple questions in the chat. I just maybe we want to answer them as well. One was from Evan. It was about the report, the soil for the soil test. It was done in winter. Is that okay? Like, when is the best time to do it, or
the soil test? Yeah.
So the ones I did were at the end of the fall, at the end of the growth season, where the plants used up the nutrients, and so I could order the amendments over the winter and apply them in the spring before planting. You could also do it in the spring. And Linda, I know Linda, you did it a few weeks ago.
Yep, I did it last week, and it'll be interesting because that will be the winter, and we can see what worked from it or didn't.
Where did you go?
Back.
Oh, sorry.
What was the question?
Where did you send your samples?
To the same place, the Logan Lab.
There's going to be a little gold star on their customer distribution map as a consequence of this, right? Because there's going to be suddenly 50 soil samples are going to be heading over to Lincoln.
From Winchester.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, where is the place you send it to?
So there's different places depending on the degree of the granular understanding of what's going on in your soil. UMass Extension does soil testing, but they don't do it as thoroughly. Logan Labs is one of the few that a lot of farmers send out to, and they're in Ohio. And their process is that you dig about six inches into the ground, and you take about 2 quarts per sample size, and you make sure it dries out, and then you mail it to them. Logan Labs, they're online. And you take samples from the different parts of the yard that you want to get an analysis of. So that each sample, so if you have 4 different places in your yard that you want to get a sample of, that's 4 different samples that you have to pay for.
I added the link to Logan Labs in the chat.
Right.
Fred, you were saying that it was like 25 or something like that?
Yeah, 25 for the sample, and then UMass, their analysis service, if you want somebody else to help you figure it out, it was $25 per analysis. But I figure that once you get a handle on what the analysis is, in the future, you wouldn't need it.
There's also an argument to be made if you're going to spend a bunch of money on plants, especially if you're putting in trees or shrubs or things that are rather costly, and your labor, it's worth knowing where you're starting from so that you don't waste money buying stuff or trying to put in stuff that's not going to do well. So it's a value, it's a real value.
Yeah.
And also to overlap with that, the pH test, it sometimes can be fairly important, and there's literally only like $2 per test. So maybe do, like I did 20 tests across the property with a huge difference. So it was really worth knowing the amendments. We really fine-tuned it.
And you can buy a pH test at pretty much any garden center, and that's not very expensive.
Yeah, one thing I learned in this process is if you've already got a more acidic part, plant what likes acidic as opposed to try to intentionally change it. And it's really neat to just be able to join in on what's already there.
There were some great questions, comments about in the chat. People said some of their aspirations. Shall we talk about those for a minute, Fred, or do you have something in
Sure.
mind? So there were several questions about shade gardens for pollinators, which there are definitely shade plants. In fact, there are some pollinators that are specialized on shade and shade plants. Somebody wanted to, yes, replace their lawn with veggies and with other things. I think it's worth noting, because lawn is a matter of some contention also. It doesn't mean that you have to give up being able to walk around your yard. You can either create paths, as were suggested for Linda's yard, or you can have a lawn that's a different mix of things. So mine is a lot of clover and some native pollinator plants. And every now and then I do have to mow it because it gets kind of high. And also when you have all the clover, there are bees in the clover, and some people don't want to walk through bees. You can also just mow a walk through the lawn. So you don't have to have an all or nothing with the lawn. And clover is a great thing also for the soil, because it holds nitrogen in the soil. It fixes nitrogen in the soil and enriches a great deal. So you get lots of benefits in addition to whatever the plants are. It's what they do to the soil. People talked about privacy screening. Yeah, that's always nice. Having little nooks in the garden, places you can go. Someone asked for interesting plants for the shade. There's a whole world that grows underneath trees. We have a perhaps skewed idea of gardens as being what happens in the sun. Think about forests everywhere, and they have things growing in at the base of the trees or under the trees, and there are a lot of native plants that grow under trees or in shade, and there are lots of options for that, including there are pollinator plants specialized for the shade. That would be one way to make a lawn more interesting, whether you've got shade lawn or sun lawn. And a couple of people talked about raised beds for veggies. I think there's interest in that. There might be a subgroup who wants to talk about raised beds. I think, Fred, you were going to do something with in Linda's garden. Do you want to talk about what you had in mind?
Actually, Fred, if you don't mind, I just want to talk about the raised gardens that I'm thinking of that we talked about for Linda's garden, and then you sort of take it. Do you mind?
We have
Yeah,
5
go ahead.
minutes.
Because the gardens are, because what Fred said before about raised gardens is true. You can get those raised gardens that are like 10 inches deep and they're at waist height. So they're great. Plant lettuce or peas or beans, but they definitely, nutrients will leach out and you'd have to amend and amend. But when you have floor to waist raised beds, then you wouldn't put all compost in that bed. Linda happens to have a bunch of big logs, maybe, 12-inch caliper, 15, whatever. Those logs could actually go in along with fresh wood chips, chopped up, mushed up leaves, some sticks, and then a lot of compost. And that slow rotting of all those unseen organisms help feed that soil and slow down water and all of that stuff. So there's also a way of imagining inside the garden bed how you can be creating a nutrient-rich environment. That's all I wanted to say. I'm hoping Fred will help design and build the beds if Linda ends up wanting them at her garden.
Yeah. So along that line of what Demetra was saying, that there is regenerative practices of how you treat the soil for what you want to grow. A healthy soil, building healthy soils, and the water balance with that. You can transfer that to raised beds, and you can also transfer that to container gardens. It just needs a lot more maintenance.
Some people would like to see the choices for the plants in Linda's yard from Demetra. Demetra, you had your PowerPoint with all those beautiful pictures.
Do you want me to do that right now, Fred? Is there time?
You got 2 minutes.
Good, either way.
I'm happy to put it someplace or show it. I don't know. Someone has to say yes or no, because I can talk pretty
I'm
plants all
going to say,
night.
let's put it all on the website, or let's
Yeah.
email it to everybody, because there's a lot of different information people have asked for, and we could do it all at once. Would that be okay?
Yeah, we'll figure that out. Can
And
I jump in on Mathilde? Someone asks about arborvitae and native versus non-native and butterfly bush and stuff. Can I jump on that question?
Go for it.
So there's such a weird feedback. So arborvitae is, native is like, the question is native to where? Native to the planet Earth, yes, but native to the New England area, not all arborvitae. And Prassede might know more about this than I do. But so some arborvitae, we have like a cedar and thuja here, but a lot of arborvitae are native to the West Coast. Like you see green giants, which are gorgeous, but they're not native here. But I want to make clear that just because it's not a native doesn't make it a bad plant. There just might be a better plant that can serve as an evergreen, gorgeous thing, like a hemlock, for instance. Although there's issues with that because it will indulge it. And then butterfly bush is definitely appealing to butterflies, and it's gorgeous and it smells good and it's fun, it's easy to grow. But no, it doesn't have a place for butterflies to grow, to lay eggs. So you want to, if you're trying to attract butterflies, you should attend to where butterflies want to lay eggs. So milkweeds, lindera, fennel, dill, parsley, rue. If you get that stuff into your gardens, then all the butterflies that are coming to the butterfly bush can at least then go and lay some eggs. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
All right, we're coming to a close. And I I think Margo's going to have the website up and running next week.
I still need
We
people.
don't have your, if we don't have your web address or email address, if you want to get notice of it, yeah, send me your email contact. Otherwise, we'll work on our show for you for next month. We'll be, by that point, we'll be in spring, and we'll have a lot of new subjects to discuss.
And
Well, it's been quite a pleasure to have you all here.
Thank
I
you
hope
all.
you've found this helpful. We're really enjoying learning about putting on this for you all, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll hang out because actually I wanted to point out that I keep forgetting to emphasize when people are going to
Bye.
generative and the principles, they should
Yep.
not go cold turkey. So when they say no-till, it's like they actually, regenerative years ago said no-till. And they're like, oh, we really don't mean no-till. We mean least disturbance.
Yeah.
And it's also for the first 2 or 3 years, if it's really compacted soil, you're going to have to disturb it a bit. There's nothing living, not much living in it to disturb. But the same thing with chemicals and pesticides, you actually are going to have to reduce it over the next few years because you don't have enough of the living soil to provide the alternate or the better solution yet. So I keep forgetting we need to kind of make sure that we point that out to people.
Carol, I wanted to ask you, I've been watching these videos and basically they're like no dig method. So
Yeah,
what do you think of that?
yeah, they're stuck with the old thinking of being too harsh with that. Because people get confused. You're like, well, I need to plant, I need to disturb the top. It's like, well, the very top you're to plant, yes. But again, the other real key is if it's really poor soil that's really compacted and doesn't have much living in it, you're not disturbing much. It's and you might have sections of the soil. Pay attention. There might be patches that actually do have relatively vibrant areas. That's where you don't disturb. But there always will be some, a little bit of disturbance. But it's the key thing is the transition period.
So when some of them, like if they have like a lawn or something, they put down cardboard, sorry, I can't speak. And then this is during like winter time, and then put the compost and you let it like sit.
Right.
Like you take your time on the thing. You don't like.
Right.
That's a technique that I have used and it works. If you want to create a brand new garden and you don't want to remove all the grass through hard work and you don't want to, till it and do all this nonsense, you can layer various things, various ingredients, like in the fall, like you said, cardboard or newspaper, and then chopped leaves, horse manure.
I think it's the lasagna method, sorry.
What?
I think they call it the lasagna method.
Lasagna, exactly. And then you walk away and you look at it looks like a burial mound. And over the winter, it goes down and down and down. And in the spring, it's all ready to be planted. All the grass is dead underneath because it's been smothered. And then as you dig your oak leaf hydrangea and your perennials and your oak tree, you're mixing it as needed. And that's the idea. And Margo, it's a lazy way to build a garden, and that's usually the best way.
I'm a lazy
Is there anything possible in the spring with that? I mean,
Yeah, I built raised beds that way.
Huh?
And raised beds, you just keep bloom, 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 bloom. So you make it
But this-
really look like a burial mound, and then it's ready to go.
I
what-
literally have the newspapers and the cardboard. I mean, we've been saving it for a long, long time. Is that worth doing it where there isn't snow just in the meantime?
No, because
Okay.
spring is too soon. So let's say this fall you want to redo your front yard, then we can create the
For the
beds.
fall.
do it.
Okay, good
But
to know.
now it's too soon. And also it doesn't work if you're putting it where there's like invasive species or some crap, you know, that
Yep.
that will never die.
Good to know.
That you gotta dig out.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
I just want to thank you. This was great. And I just learned a ton and I always love that.